Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the pod. So I was going through one of my old journals and just flipping through the pages looking for inspiration for different podcast ideas, things that we could talk about here that might bring you a little bit of value. And one, I was just reminded by how grateful I am to have journals, to take the time to actually physically write things down. I'm swimming in them after having started my journaling practice like a decade ago. I just have tons of journals on the bookshelf that I can go and I can look and I see a glimpse of where I was in time and space by pulling the journal off the shelf and looking at 2016 September. Like, what was I doing? What was I writing about? What were the thoughts that were occupying my head? And if that's not a great reason to journal, I don't know what is. Like, that's enough in and of itself. But one of the things I really love is going back through things and you stumble upon certain ideas, certain pages that resonate more than others. Like, sometimes you just it's just pure nonsense. You're like, that's not a helpful journal entry at all, past Anthony. What were you thinking? But sometimes you get something that you're like, oh, I'm ready to receive the lesson, the message that this is trying to communicate to me. And one of those things is the importance of just reviewing your goals. And we get into these temporal landmarks is what they're called, where we, the beginning of the new year, our birthday, end of the month, end of the week, like beginning of the week. These are temporal landmarks. These are landmarks in time which we create arbitrarily. And we put an arbitrary meaning onto these things. We say the New Year's, one thing has ended. It's time for new me moving forward. And we set our New Year's resolutions as we move forward into this new brave world. And end of week or the weekend, it's time to shut down and unwind. And then on Monday, the new week begins and it's time to run hard at the goal again. So we create these temporal landmarks and then we largely cultivate goals around those things. Like, oh, by the time I turn 40, I want to accomplish this, this, and this. Or by the end of this year, these are my annual goals, right? So we tend to structure our life around these temporal landmarks, and the New Year's is the biggest one typically. Now, within that year, when you set your annual New Year's resolution, those goals, 5, 6, however many you set for yourself, those are kind of like pinned to the front of your mind every day. They should be, right? They should be in reach, accessible every single moment of every single day. For instance, right now, right in front of me, these are my 12 goals for the year. They're sitting right here on my desk, so I see them all the time, just looking right back at me. And so for this year, those are very top of mind. However, if you would ask me right now, hey Anthony, what were your 12 goals for last year, for 2022? I would struggle to remember what exactly my goals were. Well, because I have my journal entry from that year, I can look back, I can review and say exactly, well, here's on January 31st, 2022, what I set for myself as my 2022 goals. And I haven't looked at these, obviously, since probably December of 2022, when I was reviewing them and saying, did I hit these goals? And then using them to influence how I'm going to set my next year's goals. And then once I had done that, they just kind of go by the wayside, don't even think about them anymore. But I think there's a lot of value in going back and reviewing where you came from so that it can help inform both moving forward, but also just so you can have a moment of glory and gratitude for what you've accomplished. Because we've talked about this in the past, where the gap between where we are and where we're striving to go, towards our greatness, towards these big ambitious goals that we have for our life, that gap, it literally never gets smaller, because as you move towards those goals, we just move the goalpost a little bit further back. So there's an infinite gap that stays in front of us on the front. And that can be very disheartening, very demotivating, because you never feel as though you've arrived, because you never have. As soon as you get to the peak of the mountain, you go right back to the bottom and you find the next peak, the next mountain to climb, right? That's just the game. But when you get on that treadmill, that hedonic treadmill, it can become very exhausting, very, very frustrating at a certain point, because you're like, well, when am I done? And when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling demotivated, I find it very, very helpful, instead of focusing on the gap between where I am and where I'm going, to take a moment to look back and to focus on the gap between where I am and where I started. And that gap only ever increases over time. right? You're moving closer and closer to your greatness and further away from who you were at the beginning of your journey. And in that gap, there's a lot of gratitude to be found. And I love looking in that gap because, 10 years ago, as just like the example, I guess it's closer to 11 years at this point, I was living in the back of a van. And so to see where I am in my life now, from that moment living in the van, had a lot of debt, had no relationship, the woman that I loved left me, and to who I am now with a committed life partner who I've been with now for 5 years. I can't remember, it's been forever. Like ADHD mind, I don't know, I can't count. Financially secure, living the life of my dreams, moving towards my goals. Like that gap there's a lot of gratitude if we just allow ourselves to stop and reflect on it. So my goals from 2022, I thought it would be interesting just to kind of read through some of these and share whether or not we hit them, if we didn't hit them. It's just interesting to look back on time. So one of my big goals for last year was to write another best-selling book. I didn't do that. In fact, I spent the whole year ideating and writing down the contents, like the story Bible behind the book that I want to write, which is called Hyperfocus. I haven't finished it though. That book means a lot to me, and what I realized was that when I published that book, one of my big goals is to hit the New York Times bestseller list. That's a big goal that for whatever reason I have for myself. It doesn't mean anything. It'd be cool to accomplish. And what I realized is that if I do that right now, even if I write the best book I'm capable of writing and I put it out there, the odds of it hitting the New York Times bestseller list was very low because I didn't have a large enough audience yet to really propel it onto that list. So what I decided mid-year was, okay, I'm actually not going to write the book this year. I'm going to continue ideating. I'm going to continue honing my craft and getting better. But instead, I'm going to focus on building the audience, building the brand, the podcast, the YouTube channel. And that way, when it does come time to write that book, when I do have that audience large enough that I feel strongly that we can launch it together to hit the list, then we will do that. So did not do that one. That was a failure. This other one right below this, launch a daily podcast. I did not accomplish that one either. This is interesting. So on this podcast, if you guys didn't realize, it is a daily podcast. So we release an episode every single day, and we've done it every single day since January 1st, 2023. So the beginning of this year. These goals were written last year. My intention was to launch this podcast in January of 2022. And I had a couple months worth of episodes in the can ready to go, because when you're doing a daily podcast like this, like it's helpful to have a little bit of wiggle room in case things go wrong. You don't want to get too far behind the 8 ball, which is really ironic right now because I've been traveling so much in the last month that we are up against it right now. We actually don't have that many episodes in the can right now. So recording right now is an attempt to get caught up on that. Anyways, I did not launch in 2022 the daily podcast. I just didn't really have the systems in place. We got distracted and higher priority things at Invictus with growing the real estate portfolio. And so that was one of those things that kind of went onto the back burner. This other goal, earn blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm proud to announce that I did that. I got my blue belt in October of 2022, and that was awesome. Like learning a new skill, especially one that's so damn difficult and uncomfortable, that was very rewarding. And I've learned a lot of really great lessons, met a ton of really great people doing jiu-jitsu. I highly recommend it for anybody that's thinking about their physical fitness, self-defense, like learning a martial art. Like I think Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a fantastic one. Okay, we had another goal here of build a YouTube channel with 100,000 subscribers. What's really fascinating about this is that until October, we only had 220 subscribers on the channel. And we were putting out consistent content. We were trying to grow, and it just really wasn't hitting. And then in October, we made some shifts to how we produced the videos. Next thing you know, they check off. I don't think that we hit 100,000 by December. I think it ended up happening in like February, so a couple months later. But even still, that was, for me, that was a very audacious goal. I did not think that was actually going to get even remotely close. So the fact that we hit that at all, and I think now we're at like 130,000, like it's absolutely remarkable to me. It's really cool to see. So chances are high that you're here because you've probably seen the YouTube channel at some point. So do appreciate you guys checking that out. If you haven't, you head over to YouTube, look it up, Anthony Vicino. I think we put out some pretty good videos. We try our best at least. So go check them out and let me know what you think. Okay, next one. Acquire $40 million in real estate. What's fascinating about that one is that we actually did that. Like we hit that goal, 40 million. And what was interesting is that was actually doubling our portfolio size. I think we were at like 35 million before that. So that was a big, hairy, audacious goal to pretty much say, we're going to double our portfolio in the next year. This year is also interesting because now we're at like 75 million. Our goal is to double this year, and we're on pace to do that. So that's crazy, but it's crazy to think by the end of the year we could be over $100 million of real estate, maybe even closer to 150. It's absolutely bonkers. But it just goes to show what can happen when you have a great team, when you have great systems, when you do right by the sellers, the relationships that you cultivate in your marketplace, opportunities just start to spring up and fish jump into boats, so to speak. And that's really what's been happening for us in the last 2 years. And it's been really, really cool to see when you finally get the flywheel going and it catches momentum on its own, and becomes almost impossible to stop. It becomes a wildly amazing thing. So those are just some of the goals from 2022 I wanted to share with you guys. Like, there were some big successes and big victories. There's also a lot of big failures, big things that like completely dropped the ball on and really didn't move forward on as much as I had intended to. So I just wanted to take this moment and share that with you because I want this to be something that you can stop and reflect on your life. If you're not currently journaling and like taking notes of these things of your past, you're really losing out on an opportunity to reconnect and rekindle the relationship with your former self. And I think there's a ton of value in that. So start journaling, start writing out your goals. Maybe take a moment right now to go and look. This is wild. I did this right after looking at these. Is I went and found my journal from 2018. So that was like 5-6 years ago. And I looked at those goals. And it is just crazy the level at which the game shifts as you grow and expand your capacities. And where I was in 2018, the things that I was striving for are so, I'm not going to say small potatoes, because that is like selling it short and a little bit disingenuous. But I look at them now and I go, oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. And that feels good. It feels good to know that we're growing, we're expanding, and we're improving over time. So take a moment. Instead of focusing on that gap between where you are and where you're trying to go and how it's never closing, take a moment to reward yourself by just turning around, look at where you started, and revel in the fact that you have probably come a really long way. So I hope you got some value out of this. As always, guys, thank you for being here. It means truly the world to me. We'll see you back around these parts tomorrow. But until then, stay hyper-focused, my friend.